The Melbourne response was established at the end of 1996 by the Archbishop of Melbourne, and it applies to everybody who is appointed by and exercises their ministry under the authority of the Archbishop. Towards Healing is a national set of principles which applies everywhere in the country and also sets out procedures that apply everywhere outside the Archdiocese of Melbourne. And it was established in early 1997. Shortly after Archbishop Pell took up office in August of 1996, it was clear to him and made clear by the civil authorities that he needed to establish an independent process for assessing complaints about sexual abuse by priests. He worked with the police, consulted with the police in doing that, and established the Melbourne response at the end of 1996. Its launch and the appointment of the Independent Commissioner was publicly supported by the police at that time. Archbishop Pell was very clear that whoever he appointed as Commissioner needed to be absolutely and transparently independent. And so he chose a senior QC, a senior member of the Victorian Bar, who that Commissioner was Mr. Peter O'Callaghan, who was well known for a range of independent inquiries that he'd conducted on other organisations, and of course has the recognised independence that any barrister brings, which we rely on in the Victorian Bar. Any independent commissioner who has acted since then alongside Mr. O'Callaghan or in other investigations has also been a senior member of the Victorian Bar, again because of the central importance of the independence that a barrister brings. When a person first takes their complaint to the Independent Commissioner, the Commissioner encourages them to make a report of that complaint to the police. He also puts them in touch with CareLink, which on behalf of the Archdiocese provides access to a range of support services for the victim throughout an investigation and subsequent to the investigation, whether that investigation is happening through the Independent Commissioner or through police. If the person doesn't wish for their investigation to be handled by the police and formally states that in writing, then the Independent Commissioner will make an initial assessment of whether the person about whom they've made a complaint should step aside from ministry and would make that recommendation to the Archbishop if necessary, and the Archbishop would always follow that recommendation. The Independent Commissioner, if the police are not carrying out an investigation, would then begin an investigation which happens completely independently from the Archdiocese, but with the full cooperation of the Archdiocese and of its staff and personnel. During any police investigation, whether that happens at the beginning or is begun at some point down the track, the Independent Commissioner's process is suspended. At the conclusion of the investigation, the Independent Commissioner makes a finding, and in 97% of the cases that finding has been to uphold the complaint. He then makes a recommendation to the Archbishop about what action should be taken with respect to the offender if the offender is still alive, and that would involve a withdrawal from ministry and often laicization. The Archbishop has always followed the recommendations of the Independent Commissioner. And then in the Melbourne response, there's an independent compensation panel who takes the finding of the Independent Commissioner or equally can act on the findings of the police. And that compensation panel is, like the Independent Commissioner, chaired by a senior barrister and has 4 members, all independent of the Archdiocese. They consider the case and they make a recommendation to the Archbishop about the amount of compensation that should be paid, which again the Archbishop has followed in every instance. There have been 308 victims whose complaints have been upheld. They've related to 83 offenders. 69 of those have been priests or male religious, and the remainder have been female religious or laity. Over the 16 years that the Melbourne response has been operating, there's been various refinements to the way that it operates. The most significant of those happened at the beginning of 2011 when the terms of reference for the Independent Commissioner were revised as a result of conversations with the Victoria Police to ensure that there was no possibility of the Commissioner's investigations interfering inadvertently with police operations. The police were very aware of that and they approved the announcement of those revisions.